Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak. This is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the weekend. Loaded show for you today. We're going to talk about how Toyota can do no wrong, which is apparently why huge swaths of Tundra owners are having their engines blow up. And if you have a 2023 and up Tundra or Lexus LX equipped with the same V6 turbo, you probably won't want to miss the third half of this show. We're also going to talk about good news about car theft, and that is that it is trending downwards. Finally, we'll talk a little bit about why that might be happening. And we're going to talk about why Rivian owners are destroying their tires without realizing it. And also how they know nothing about their own vehicles. We're going to get to that and your car sounds. I got some new car sounds to share too. Really excited about that. Now, it's been a busy week for me. I impulse bought a K24 and it arrived with some goodies on it from the great folks at ASM. Shout out to Andy at ASM. And the funny thing is, I've just finished putting the S2000 together, pre-K24, without that, right? I did the suspension. I did all the bushings, stuff no one wants to do. I did a roll cage. That was easy. No, you can't see me shaking my head. No, it wasn't. Harnesses, and I even did a new vinyl wrap on the car, which if you're watching on YouTube, or Rumble or Facebook, you might, maybe, you really can't see it. But trust me, it is shiny. The new wrap is shiny, which is actually a problem because now you can really see all the dents in the car. So I kind of don't know if I should have put a new wrap on it. I should have left the old vinyl wrap on that was all crusty and nasty. But anyway, so the car is all together, basically. It runs great, drives great. I'm going to blow that up. No sooner than did I actually put the car back together, then am I embarking on a whole nother project, which is doing a non-stock motor swap, swapping out the stock F20C engine for a K24 K-Series engine. And the reason I'm doing that is because the F20C is running great right now, which is bad juju. That's not allowed to happen, okay? That's not allowed. That means when you're sitting there going, gosh, the car just runs so great right now. That's bad. That's really bad. That means something inevitable is going to happen, and it's going to happen abruptly, and then there's going to be pieces of the engine that should be on the inside of the engine that are no longer on the inside of the engine. So anyway, time to swap it before something happens. Also, those F-Series are getting pretty pricey. They're passing $5,000-$6,000 for used engines with 150,000 miles, which mine does have. So that probably has nothing to do with my motivation. Probably. So anyway, now I want to talk about submarines. I know this is a car show, but submarines and cars are similar-ish when you think about it. They're both made out of metal, usually. They both sink in the water. So basically, they're the same thing when you think about it. And I have to mention this. This comes by way of the New York Times. Here's the headline. Billionaire plans to dive to the Titanic in a newly designed submersible. And if you are watching on the video feed of the show, I have a picture of it up on the screen right now. And, a rendering of it. And this submersible is acrylic hulled instead of carbon fiber hulled. They did change that key design component. But the guy's name is Larry Connor. He's 74. He made his wealth in real estate and said he's building a new acrylic hulled submersible, and I'm quoting the New York Times here, that will be certified and rigorously tested to show that deep sea exploration is safe. Safe is not the word I would use for that. Risky, doable, but risky. That's what I would say. Now, that being said, he made his money in real estate, and he now wants to be one of the many explorers who have explored the already explored Titanic. Now, with that, we have to look at this here, because literally a year ago to this month, the Titan went down. And I mean, if you likely know about it. If you don't, I mean, you've been living probably at the bottom of the sea if you haven't heard about it. And it went down, tragically killing all 5 passengers on board. which is sad. That's very sad. And it went down when it not capsized, when it became, when the pressure became too great and crushed the vessel. Apparently it happened very quickly, and it's tragic every way you look at it. And that's the fact that deep sea exploration is inherently risky. We're talking like 13,000 feet under the water, right? I mean, this is a huge depth, okay? And here's the thing. How have we learned nothing about the accident from just a year ago? It hasn't even been all that long. And so let me get this straight, right? The very thing that catastrophically failed less than a year ago, killing everyone involved nearly in an instant, you want to do that again? Mind blown, right? Now, here's the thing with exploration and stuff like this. When it goes wrong, you'll need rescuing, right? Now, granted, not that there's that much to rescue when we're talking about the scale, the depth that we're dealing with here. But this, I also have to mention this. This comes by way of News Nation. Titanic sub-search effort cost the U.S. an estimated $1.6 million. And that's not actually including the salvage of the vessel, but that was just for all of the search and rescue efforts. Now, I was chatting with my Salem media colleague, Jason Lupo, and I can't take credit for this genius idea, but he said, why the billionaires doing this? Why shouldn't they should just put money up front for the rescue, kind of like a deposit to say, hey, we're not going to burden the taxpayers with this. Why don't we put the money up front for the rescue, and if we don't need rescuing, great, we get the money back, or maybe we get that off on our taxes at the end of the year, something like that, right? That would be fantastic. That would make a lot of sense, by the way, and take the burden off the taxpayers. So I think that's pretty simple. Why not do that? Now, granted, I understand the desire to explore. I've talked about that with polar expeditions by car. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. If anything, there's something commendable to that. However, exploring literally the most documented shipwreck in the world, is that adventurous? I mean, what about significantly more interesting shipwrecks? I mean, yeah, 1,500 people died on the Titanic. That is tragic. And sure, it was an important historical event that defined how we manage risk, how we build ships, and a whole lot of things. But it wasn't the most deadly ship crash. That title goes to the German Wilhelm Gustave, January 1945, which was sunk by a Soviet sub. 9,400 souls were lost. And how about this? How about we explore something with some more historical significance outside of the fact that it was a ship that sunk with some famous people on it, and there was a movie about it with Leonardo DiCaprio in it, or someone like him. I think I've heard of Leonardo DiCaprio. He sounds familiar. But anyway, how about these ships? How about these as an alternative for billionaires to look at exploring that have great historical significance and aren't as explored as the Titanic? The U.S. steamship Portland. It sunk in 1898, had almost 900 people on board, and you probably haven't heard much about it. It was even nicknamed the Titanic of New England, despite the fact that the Titanic sank 13 some years after the fact. But don't worry about that. What about the USS Macon? That was the largest U.S. airship. Yes, airship, which crashed into the sea and sank in 1933. Or how about, okay, fine, if you want to do something well documented but has some historical significance, what about the World War II German battleship, the Bismarck? Just like the Titanic, it's had expeditions to explore it, but even now, it might still contain German military secrets from World War II. We don't know. So I'm just saying, all of these would be way more interesting than the Titanic. I mean, where are the billionaires lining up to do more expeditions like these? Obviously nowhere, because there wasn't a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and it made about them. So anyway, for the sake of those involved with this new expedition, though, I do wish them a safe trip. You've been listening to the Boatmotive ADHD show. We'll be right back after the break. We're going to talk about Rivian. That's coming up.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Transmissions. Shift.
And that was how things work with an engineer. More of how things work can be found at facebook.com/automotive ADHD.
car sounds were sent in by Jack Morrow. That's his 1954 Buick Special, swapped, he says, onto a shortened 1986 C10 frame. It's got a 454. We're talking big block there. And he says he's listening from northern Michigan. Jack, I want to thank you for sending that car sound in. And I want to give you a little bit of an apology. I got burned by Facebook's comment sorting. Jack actually sent this in like a month ago. And I was checking the comments. There's nothing here. There's nothing here. And then, it was sorting by most relevant, which is a thing Facebook does, not most recent. And it filtered out Jack's video there. So, Jack, my apologies for that. I'm sorry I didn't get to your car sound earlier, but hey, better late than never. Also, check your inbox. I will send you a keychain and a sticker just out of good faith, I think. So, now, that being said, we do have some other cool things going on with car sounds. You know, you can send your car sounds into the show. I play them on the radio. I feature them on the Facebook page, all of the above. And I like to do that. I live vicariously through you, through your car sounds. And I want to give you something a little extra. We're going to do a bonus for the month of June, since it is Pikes Peak Hill Climb month. And if you're watching on video, you'll see I'm wearing a Pikes Peak Hill Climb hat. And what I have, if you send car sounds in, they have to be new car sounds, in the month of June to my Facebook page, facebook.com/automotiveadhd. I will pull from a random pile of car sounds. I will pick at random to pick one winner to win some neat stuff, which I have sitting over here. All right, you win not only another Pikes Peak Hill Climb hat. This is from the 101st running of the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. It's actually last year's, by the way. You know, hey, we're better late than never, right? In the spirit of that. It is unworn. It is brand new. It is, it's definitely unworn. And that's a nice blue snapback hat, and it's a really nice hat, and a Pikes Peak Hill Climb sticker. Now, I'm not sponsored by the Hill Climb. I paid for these with my own money. In fact, I got these at last year's Hill Climb. And this hat had been sitting in my closet for quite some time. I have this other one, but this one had sat in there. I kind of forgot I bought it. I was digging through the closet this weekend, and I said, man, the Hill Climb's coming up. What a great time to give this hat away. And in addition to that, you'll also get the Automotive ADHD keychain. I'll wave the keys at the microphone as if my listeners on the radio can see them. You can on video, though. It's an embroidered... was holding it upside down. It's an embroidered key tag, and it's really great. I use these on my keys all the time. Helps you fish it out of your pocket. It also, when you set these keys down on the countertop at the bar, trying to, pick up a date, for example, it lets all of the people around you know that they should stay absolutely clear of you because you have terrible tastes in automotive programming on the online and on the radio. But it can be yours for the low price of some car sound submitted to the show. So I'll pick a winner at random at the end of this month. Of course, the Hill Climb is coming up here at the end of the month, and we will be broadcasting live from the Pikes Peak Hill Climb Fan Fest. I will also be attending some of the practice days as media. And we're going to be following along with Jimmy Ford, jimmyfordracing.com. He's starting a really great program, by the way, to help people get into racing. I'll tell you more about it here coming up soon because we're going to have him on the show here pretty soon. So anyway, I got to talk a little bit here. I should mention facebook.com/automotiveadhd. Again, one more time, that's where you send the car sounds in. And while you're at it, like the Facebook page too. Give it a like. Anyway, so Rivian owners. I have a bone to pick with Rivian owners. Namely because they drive Rivians. They're kind of like Tesla owners, but also worse because they're like Tesla hipsters. Because they're too cool to own a Tesla because everyone owns a Tesla, so they got to have something different. And that makes them hipsters. And they're still driving EVs, which also makes them hipsters. So they're like double hipsters in my eyes, which it's not like a double negative where it cancels out. No, it actually, it's a multiplier. It multiplies by a factor of 6. Don't ask me where I'm getting these numbers. Just know that they're 100% accurate. And I have a degree in those numbers, probably. So anyway, no, I have a degree in broadcasting. Can you imagine that? Who does that? But anyway, so this is an op-ed from Johnny Lieberman from Motor Trend, and he is a Rivian owner, and he has explained a problem that I didn't know existed because I'm not a hipster. Mostly because I also don't own a Rivian. But he was talking about how he met up with a guy at a Rivian charger. They were charging their trucks together and talking about Rivians as Rivian owners, and I imagine lots of other EV owners do, because there's a lot of time to pass when you're sitting there waiting for the electrons to go into the battery pack. But he was talking to this other owner who said, hey, it's kind of weird. My tires only lasted 6,000 miles. And Mr. Lieberman from Motor Trend said, gee, that's weird. Mine will last like 20,000 miles. He's like, I've had, 3 different sets of tires that he's tried out for different reasons, also because he's an automotive journalist, but he's had his tires last a lot longer than that. And he discovered something that exists because owners apparently aren't reading the owner's manual, but Rivian also is not being very clear, even in their own owner's manual. So you might say, why would one Rivian be getting great mileage out of a tire and another Rivian getting terrible mileage out of a tire? Also, when we're talking about getting like 20,000 miles out of a set of tires, you're talking to a guy who does like autocross and as much time on the track as I can. And like, I'm lucky to get like a month or 2 out of a set of tires. So these are like mind-blowing numbers to me. But regardless, the Rivian has a couple of drive modes here. Okay. And one of the modes is conserve mode. And bear in mind, the Rivian has air suspension. It can raise, it can lower, it can do all this different stuff, and the different modes dictate the different ride heights and different characteristics. So conserve mode, the owner's manual says, is used for long trips when you want to optimize battery range. And what it does is it uses the front wheels of the truck and doesn't drive the back wheels of the truck. So it becomes front wheel drive. Not sure why you wouldn't do it as rear wheel drive, but maybe just because they don't like having fun. I don't know. But it is conserve mode. That is the point of it. And it also lowers the truck drastically. It sets it down to basically its lowest ride height so that it can achieve maximum aerodynamic status, right? So it can be as aerodynamic as possible. Now, bear in mind that the Rivian's about 7,000 pounds, and with 2 of the motors off, it's 410 horsepower basically, or I guess one of the axles off, the front, not 2 of the motors. But with the rear axle disabled, the rear motor, you got the front one. They say it's about 400-ish horsepower. The truck has a peak horsepower of 835 horsepower, by the way, all things, turned up to the max on it, which is a lot. And he said, Mr. Lieberman here from Motor Trend once again said that one other thing he's heard from other Rivian owners, I don't really like the truck. It's boring. It doesn't ride well. It's not as fast as my Tesla, blah, 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 right? Well, the problem is he found that it is this conserve mode. So what happens? Conserve mode drops it down, right? More aerodynamic. Well, people seem to think that means conserve mode. I want to conserve all the time while I'm driving around town. I want the best range possible. It is a logical conclusion, but the owner's manual specifically states that it is for long trips. And the reason that makes sense is because of the aerodynamics. If you're just trying to conserve around town, dropping the truck down low and being aerodynamic when you're doing 25 and 30 through traffic, that's not conserving anything. The difference is negligible, right? But what happens and how this relates to the tires is when the truck drops down to its lowest setting, because of the suspension geometry, the wheels actually develop some negative camber. So the tops of the wheels point in and the bottoms kind of point out. It kind of not toe, that's a totally different term. I shouldn't use that, but it kind of pulls you've seen what camber looks like. You've seen the guys driving around, the stance guys with excessive camber. The wheels look like they're gonna like fall off. Anyway, you get the idea, but it doesn't do it so drastically. But those couple degrees of camber that are affected when you run in the lowest ride height is enough to mean that when you're cruising around all the time, that you're basically on the inner edge of the tire, wearing that portion of the tire out faster, and that's the problem. And this to me is one thing. The fact that Rivian doesn't maybe explain this better is a bit of a wonder to me. But it's also not something people have had to think about necessarily. It isn't. This is a behavior, a function of a vehicle most people really aren't all that used to. And I will say, I do think that Rivian makes a smart looking truck. They do look good. Of all the EV trucks on the market, I feel like Rivian's looks the best, followed up by the F-150 Lightning, and then that's, of course, followed up by literally anything that isn't the Cybertruck. Literally anything. So, and now, does this conserve mode really affect the range? I don't know, but it leads me to a point, which is that being misinformed about your own vehicle is not an excuse. You should know the ins and outs of whatever vehicle you're driving, and that includes this Rivian. And I'll admit, if I wasn't paying all that much attention, and let's admit, who reads the owner's manual, right? Well, actually, I'm a car guy, and I'll get bored, and I'll read my own owner's manual sometimes. But reading the manual's for chumps, obviously. So no one reads the manual. But, with a car that's got all these screens and infotainment and can explain stuff, you can have at least I've given my opinion about screens in cars and why I hate them. But at the very minimum, if you've got a button or a setting and you don't know what it does, because you have a screen, they could put a little question mark in there. You can hit that little question mark, and then it can tell you what that button does, what that mode does. And maybe, for example, like this, saying conserve mode should be used on the highway, where the aerodynamic benefits are the greatest. Also, if you drive around town all the time in conserve mode, this will ruin your tires, so don't do it. Perhaps they could do that. Perhaps they could. But being uneducated about your own vehicle is no excuse. And when you think about it, too, let's pull the discussion away from electric vehicles and just look at gas-powered cars. Any car. It can be pedal-powered. It can be Fred Flintstone-powered, right? You should know how your car operates. You should know what all the warning lights do. I can't tell you how many times I have non-car friends, yes, believe it or not, I do, who say, oh, and I've told this story before on the show. One of my friends, she called me and she said, hey, Matt, the oil change light is on in my car. What do I do? I was like, is it the oil change light or the little genie bottle looking thing? Oh, it's the little genie bottle looking thing. And I go, uh-oh, that's a problem. That's not good. You don't want that. That's the oil pressure light. But she didn't know. And if you're going to be operating a big vehicle, any vehicle, and as they get bigger and heavier, as they're faster, you should know all the ins and outs of your car. As a motorist, that is your responsibility. You don't have to know how it works. You don't have to know how to take it apart. But you should know how to change a tire. You should know what the warning lights mean. You should know what all the different functions on your car do, because at some point, it might be important. So anyway, there you go. You're listening to Automotive ADHD. We're going to talk about car theft after the break.
Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
Yes, it is. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the radio as well as, online. You can catch this show on several great radio stations here in Southern Colorado, as well as a podcast on video, YouTube, Facebook, all of the above. Now, before we talk about auto theft, it is on the decline. It is trending downwards. I want to talk about this because this is just fun. John Cena, famous wrestler, his name is John Cena. You know the memes, right? Right. So I hope you do. But he is a celebrity. He's a popular former wrestler in the same vein as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, right? And he's almost more famous, I would argue now, for just being a famous guy than he is for wrestling. I think more people just know him because he's famous than for anything else. It's like, that's like ultimate status there. You're just known because you're famous. What are you famous for? Nobody knows. I mean, obviously we know he's a wrestler and he had a wrestling career, and obviously that's very cool. But I'm just saying, I think more people know him just because he is who he is. Same with The Rock, right? Well, he's a self-proclaimed car guy, which immediately puts him a rung above all the other celebrities in my book, which is not a very high rung, by the way. That's not like that. That's not that much higher, but it is a little bit higher. And he has, he's fond of all sorts of different cars. If I'm correct, he's got a Jeep YJ that he still has. He bought when he was, Wrangler YJ, and he bought it when he was just starting his career and he was broke and just had to get around, but wanted something fun that you could throw the top off of, take the doors off of, all of that stuff. And I relate to that as someone who also has a YJ. Though mine is, I don't know if mine's in as good of shape as his, because he's got that money. But anyway, he's also a self-proclaimed Honda fanatic. And the only thing that could make this better is if he was a Toyota fanatic, but I'll cut him some slack right there. And he famously has had a FK8 Civic Type R, and he just swapped it for the new FL5 Civic Type R. And he posted about this on X, otherwise known by the same universe as Twitter. And why is this cool? This is cool just because he's a celebrity. He's also not driving up in a Bentley, a Maybach, a Maserati, which they're not even that cool anyway. Or no, he's not doing any of that. He's kind of being down to earth. He's like, hey, I have so much money, but I am going to buy a Civic. I'm a celebrity, but I'm going to buy a Civic and drive it around. And I think that's really cool. And of course, he does like charity stuff and things like that too. But I think this is just cool when you see like celebrities out there who are car guys. Like, you're not a celebrity buying a Civic Type R unless you appreciate the joy of driving. And that's one of the things that's like, to me, that it's maybe where I have a little bit of a disconnect with people who are just supercar guys. Because people who are only supercar fanatics who buy the car because of the badge, because of the status, that doesn't, 9 out of 10 times, there are exceptions, but 9 out of 10 times, they don't really like driving. They want to be seen in that car when they pull up to some fancy gala or event. But they don't actually want to drive that car. Maybe a little bit, but they don't want to have fun with it. No. John Cena, meanwhile, is here buying Civic Type Rs, which, yeah, it's a pretty pricey Civic as far as Civics go. It's about as expensive as they get, but it's got a manual transmission. It is a car that is there for the sake of driving enjoyment. No one is rolling up to the club in a Civic Type R and going, yeah, park it out front. No, it's not happening. I mean, to us car guys, we like these cars. We put them on a pedestal. We put them on a pedestal maybe higher than perhaps they should be, but they're cool cars, and I appreciate how down to earth this is. And by the way, his previous Civic Type R is now presumably going to be for sale at a Florida car dealership. So it's I guess just going to be on the used lot. You can go scoop it up. By the way, if you're watching on the video here, here's a quick picture of that. There he is standing with the brand new, the white one's the new one, the blue one's his old one. I actually kind of like the previous gen, the way the previous generation of Type R looked. The new one's maybe a little more reserved and a little more understated. I don't know. I'm a little conflicted on how those cars look. They're both sharp looking cars. And of course, turbo and VTEC and fun. I mean, you can't beat that. That's good stuff there. So I appreciate that. And again, if you want John Cena's old Civic Type R, well, hey, you can maybe go buy it. It'll just be there with the other used cars. No, I'm sure the car dealership is going to hype that up. That's going to be right there in the center of the showroom, and they're going to say, this was John Cena's car. I don't know. Or maybe he'll auction it at some charity auction too. That would be a good use of it. So anyway, there you go. Now, I want to talk a little bit here as we get on through the show. I promised I'd tell you about some car theft, and the fact is that we have good news when it comes to car theft. And I actually have a thing here, if you can believe this. If you can, it is this is a newspaper, by the way. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I'll put it that way. If you're listening on the podcast, you may have never actually seen one of these before. But this is a newspaper. This is Colorado Politics, and they have headline here: "Are laws working? Auto theft is trending downward in Colorado, and some credit legislation cracking down on the crime." That's interesting. Now, I'll pull this up here, and we'll kind of just run through some of the stats, because last year I had Sheriff Rich Smith from Custer County on my show. He's also a board member for the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention Authority. Now, I ran a best of the show a couple of weeks ago because I was out slacking off at a track day instead of being, here and doing this show. And my interview with Sheriff Rich Smith was one of the ones I ran. So it's actually really good timing that this comes out here. And in 2023, let's look at the data here. Statewide data shows 38,223 car thefts, a decrease from a record high in 2022 of 47,052 car thefts. A pretty sharp drop in crime there. Now, last year, our governor in this state signed Senate Bill 097 and Senate Bill 257. These are essentially there to increase the penalty for car theft. One of the things Sheriff Rich Smith said on my show is, well, in response to my question of why is this happening more? What are the reasons for this? He said, people and places that are softer on crime, there's not as much of a disincentive to do these sort of things. Now, he credited some other factors too. You'll just have to go back on the podcast and listen to that show. And it's easy to find because it's in the best of, actually. You'll find it just a couple weeks back. Now what's interesting is our governor also a couple years ago signed a bill to reduce the theft penalties for theft. And now he's signing a bill to increase the penalties for theft. But we'll leave that where that's at for now. But Polis challenged legislators, according to the paper here, to pass tougher penalties on car theft, in a plea that came less than 2 years after signing legislation that actually lowered the penalty for some car theft offenses. In 2021, he had approved legislation that overhauled Colorado's misdemeanor laws, whose provisions included making it a Class 1 misdemeanor to steal a car if its value is less than $2,000. So, and before these new laws were signed in, and this now goes to before July 1st, 2023, if it was $2,000, if it was more than $2,000, it was considered a felony. If it was less than $2,000, it was a misdemeanor. And that, I think, fueled people to steal cars that are cheaper from people who can, well, I'll say it this way, who can afford it the least. You're stealing sub $2,000 cars because you'll just get a slap on the wrist and you'll be bailed out same day, no problem, not a big deal. And you're stealing these cheaper cars. That affects people who have cheaper cars, and people who have cheaper cars probably don't have full coverage on those cars. That might be their only car, and that I think is almost more egregious. And that's what the laws sought to remedy last year. Now we're seeing the effects of that. I'll tell you a couple of other interesting stats here. We'll get to that, and we'll talk about Toyota to wrap things up here on the Automotive ADHD show. You know Toyota can do no wrong, and that's why engines are failing in the new Tundras. I'll explain all of it. You're listening to the Automotive ADHD show. Hey, don't go anywhere. Listening to Automotive ADHD, Colorado's #1 and maybe only car show, at least here in Southern Colorado on the radio. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars. That car sound I just played, normally I play listener-submitted car sounds. I have a confession. That was a little self-serving. That was one of my own car sounds. Am I allowed to do that? I think the answer is probably no, but you know what? It's my show, so I'll play that there. That was from my track day, the same track day I was playing Hooky from on the radio a couple of weekends ago when I ran a best of, which was a great best of. Featured some interviews with Steve Emmers, the guardrail guy, Sheriff Rich Smith. If you missed that one, and maybe you haven't heard those interviews, if you're new to the show, if you're new to the podcast or the radio show, you should go check that out. Really good stuff there. And it ties into what I'm talking about today, which is car theft. And I'm giving you some stats here from Colorado Politics, an actual physical newspaper. Can you imagine that? These still exist. And hat tip Thelma Grimes, by the way, who put the stats together in here. And a couple other things I was talking about before the break. We talked about how the laws have increased the penalty. They decreased it initially. Now they're increasing the penalty again for car theft because previously it was a misdemeanor to steal a car under $2,000 and a felony to steal a car above that. And that just affects people who have cheap cars who don't have comprehensive insurance on it. And that might be their only car. That's like, those are folks who are working hard to make ends meet, driving the kids to school. I think it is absolutely horrible that someone would steal a car from somebody who's just trying to make ends meet like that. From anybody, right? From anybody. But even more so if that person says, I can't take my kids to school today. I can't take the family out to go get groceries, whatever, right? That to me, it almost should be a bigger penalty for stealing cheaper cars. But they revised the penalties, and the stats here are showing that. So what I'm looking at right here, 2023, Colorado Springs, by the way, did see an increase in car theft. It's the exception to the rest of the stats in the rest of the state. Now, I imagine other states, for my listeners listening nationally on the podcast, I haven't forgotten about you, but these are kind of reflecting things in many other states now. I think as governors, as legislators are seeing the crimes go up, they're saying, hey, we got to do something to bring this back down. Now, auto theft was down by 22% in Colorado for the first quarter of 2023, which Colorado Springs, by the way, in 2023, my home city where I'm broadcasting from, though you might be listening to this in the Wet Mountain Valley or in Canyon City or, hey, maybe even in Pueblo. But Colorado Springs saw an increase, like I said. But in 2022, the Springs reported 2,864 auto thefts. Now, in 2023, that number rose to 4,295. One of those of that number was my very own beloved 1977 AMC Hornet, which you may recall I read a eulogy for it here on the show, and it was very sad. It was very somber, and then I found the car. The thieves didn't want it anymore. And so I got it back, and then such is life. But anyway, and then I traded it for a Jeep Wagoneer, and then I sold it. Don't worry about it. Anyway, the AMC is somewhere living along happily now. But overall, what we're seeing here is that aside from Colorado Springs is the outlier. We went up, but the rest of the state went down by big numbers. And this, I think you could attribute to more awareness when it comes to auto theft. More awareness. Perhaps because people heard it here on my radio show, perhaps because they heard it on TV, on wherever, because it's been a big thing. And I mean, we were running headlines that, hey, Colorado's #1 in the nation for auto theft. We're beating out everyone, like New Jersey and like the East Coast and all of that. No, we're beating them all out. Portland, Oregon, whatever. We're beating them all in car theft. And I think people are wising up to it because there's a couple things you can do. I mean, for one, awareness is key. Parking your car in situationally aware areas, under street lights, even stuff like that, making sure you've got line of sight to it. All these things, simple things. Not parking at the Denver International Airport, just avoiding that altogether as out of principle because majority of the auto thefts were happening there. And Sheriff Rich Smith even on the show commented how they're organized crime rings. It's not just like one-off car thefts, like organized crime going out and stealing cars in droves out of the Denver International Airport. But one of the things I recommended, not something to prevent a crime, but for something to help after the fact, is GPS trackers. And I will warn you, and I've talked about this before on the show, but I will warn you against using Apple AirTags. Apple AirTags rely on another person's cell phone to be in a nearby vicinity. And unfortunately, what that means is that there has to be someone with a cell phone that has cellular connection. And the AirTags is an anti-stalking feature because people with nefarious motivations will stalk people with them, will also notify you if you have an iPhone that, hey, there's an AirTag following you. Well, I don't want the thief, the guy who just stole my car, to get notified that there's an AirTag following him while he's driving my car, and then he's going to pull over and start looking for it to get rid of it. I don't want that. The benefit to AirTags is they are cheap. They are cheap. What can I say? But here we go. I'm going to show you if you're watching on video, you can see it here. This is the GPS tracker that I have. There's a number of brands, a number of models. You just pick whichever one is good for your price range. And this one has GPS and cellular, and it's separate. It's its own thing. It even has its own SIM card, by the way. So, and this is completely separate from running off of someone's cell phone. And the neat thing about it is it's battery powered. And I can charge it up, throw it in the trunk of the car, hide it behind a panel, put it underneath the car. I have it in this nice little, it's like a miniature Pelican case. It's a little sealed plastic lockbox with some really strong magnets on the back. And so I have several of these. Actually, I've got a bunch of them for all my cars. And you can hardwire these into the car too, so you don't have to worry about charging them. I like keeping them mobile so I can swap it car to car. I might have one car locked up in the garage or the mini storage or something, and maybe I want it on my trailer for a weekend. So I have these mobile. But the benefit of these is they will always work as long as there's charge in the battery or they've got power from the vehicle. They will always work. And it's great too if you hardwire them, because if the thieves disconnect your battery, well, these have an internal battery too, and it'll run for like 3 or 4 weeks, even if the thieves disconnect the battery in your car. So these are a great investment. Yeah, they do cost money. And, not to get into specifics, each brand is a little different. They all operate about the same way. I think this one's, $25 a month per tracker. And I've got a few of these. So say $100 a month. Just think of that as like additional insurance. Obviously, if you have one car, just $25 a month. Think of it like your car insurance being $25 more expensive every month. And that's just a penalty, I think. Not a penalty, but a price to pay for some peace of mind with GPS trackers. And again, my official advice, steer clear of the AirTags. I've even seen mainstream news outlets recommending, hey, get an AirTag on your car if you want to prevent auto theft. I really disagree with those out of principle. Again, because the AirTags, they're not designed for that type of use. They're designed for putting in your luggage at the airport. They're designed for sticking on the back of your phone or your wallet if you misplace it. They're not designed for tracking vehicles. Yes, they can do it. Sure, they can do it. But you're relying on someone being nearby with an iPhone that can then relay what the AirTag is doing. The AirTag doesn't have the power by itself to transmit far and wide, whereas these dedicated GPS trackers, they absolutely can. So that's my recommendation when it comes to car theft there, or at least, recovering from car theft as someone who's had a vehicle stolen now at this point. So anyway, I ran myself out of time to talk about Toyota. And I think what we'll do is go ahead and we're going to do and I'm just doing this on the fly. I'm telling you, I'm terrible at pacing myself here on the show sometimes. You probably noticed, but let's do a bonus episode on the podcast. So if you're listening right now on the radio and you want to hear more, you want to hear about the recall going on with Toyota that might affect you, and how their engines are blowing up, and how Toyota, of course, can do no wrong. I'll explain all of these things. We'll do it on the bonus episode of the podcast. So I want you to go onto Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you get your shows, wherever fine shows, and mine are downloaded, and check that out. I'll probably post it here after the show as its own thing. So hey, thanks for listening to the Automotive ADHD show. I'll talk to you next week right here, same time, same place, when we're talking more cars.